Flex Reaching New Heights exploration is all about the station rotation model. And station rotation stems from a blended learning model, but it can be useful, of course, in in-person or hybrid settings and also in fully remote settings. So let's learn more about it. Hi, I'm Lynn from OPDC here at BCIU, and my contact information is lynnhill@berksiu.org if you want to chat about station rotation or ask any questions. In this brief session, we're going to introduce the station rotation model and give you lots of examples of station rotation in action. Definitely access the resource slides for this session because it has linked examples of templates and models that you can refer to when you are designing your own station rotation for your classes. We'll talk about strategies for success, examples of learning activities to try in rotations, and then there are many additional resources that you can explore through the slide deck. So what is a station rotation model? By definition from the Blended Learning site, the station rotation model allows students to rotate through stations on a fixed schedule, where at least one of the stations is an online learning station. Now, this model has been around for many years prior to COVID learning, and so in fully remote or blended environments, quite possibly more than one station will be online. This model is most common in elementary schools because teachers are already familiar rotating in centers or stations. But hear me now, middle school and high school teachers, station rotation can absolutely work for you as well. What it looks like, just from a visual perspective, is that there are a certain number of stations, could be 3, could be 4. Please know that everything you see is entirely customizable to your needs and to your student needs. In fully remote settings, you might have 100% of these stations online, of course, but you typically have an online instruction or content exploration space. You have a teacher-led instruction group, and then you have collaborative activities and collaborative stations. In an online setting, collaborative stations could be facilitated through breakout rooms in your web conferencing tools. And if you are teaching concurrently to groups in person and at home, you could even include students together in groups from at home and in person settings. If you have the luxury, which I know that it is, of having a co-teacher or a paraprofessional, use those adults to help manage your station rotations. So if you're saying to yourself, wait a minute, learning centers are not new, I have done this before, you are correct. So don't be intimidated by the vocabulary station rotation. If you call them learning centers, if you call them stations, if you call it small group instruction and just have kids rotate through, all of that can work in this model. The distinction with the official version of what station rotation is that at least one station needs to be facilitated online. So what can it look like? The rest of the next couple of slides are going to show you some visualizations of how teachers are bringing station rotation to life in their classrooms. There is an educator named Catlin Tucker. She's an educational consultant. I'm not sure if she's still in the classroom or not, but she has done a wealth of content creation around station rotation model and sharing her experiences. And so throughout these slides, you're going to see links to her examples and her work. Here's an example of a 3-station model where there's teacher-led instruction. And what are teachers doing during this time? Well, it really depends on the goals of learning for the students during the rotations. So sometimes teachers are doing targeted instruction. They're hosting Q&A sessions. They're reteaching or scaffolding. The role of the teacher changes throughout. You're not always going to be doing the same thing in your rotations. And we'll see later on, that's really what drives how you are planning for what's going to happen at the rotations. The online station could take advantage of some of the digital tools that we have available to us, some of the platforms your students are using. Could be time for research and designing and reflecting and publishing. And then offline stations or online group stations could be involved for peer discussion, collaborative problem solving, and things of that nature. Here's another look at what that could look like. So definitely check out if your students are in person, but you still need to respect social distancing measures, of course. There are some great suggestions for you there. This teacher, What's New with Leah, from her blog, has shown how she works through 2 days or more of a station rotation. And that's something you want to think about, is how many days long will you spend in the rotation? If you have the luxury of having very large blocks of time with your students, then you could possibly work through all of your rotations in one day, but not all teachers have that, so they have to span it across a number of days. So in her model, she has a bell ringer, that's a review topic or a concept. They break into stations, and then they come back at the end for some type of assessment activity. Here's an example of how it could look from an in-person perspective. This is an example of how it could look and with 6 groups with various stations. So you can see how the color coding is even taking advantage of co-teaching, because there's teacher A and teacher B. There are 2 offline options. Don't forget, even if you're fully remote, you can give your kids some offline tasks to complete. Offline A, offline B, and then there are 2 digital options, digital A, digital B, okay? If you click on any of these examples, you will be able to dive deeper. This is from Greg Kulowich, who developed a template for you to use in Google Slides, showing how long the duration of the rotation is. The groups, you can add student names. There's a time built in for whole group to come together. Each of those links will lead the students to their instructions, materials for the station activities. So you can see how they break out, and then they come back, and then there's some kind of checkout. And so this is a really great approach as well. In this example, the teacher took advantage of having that virtual classroom space. The screens are actually links that take students to the activity. So they have a number of different tasks to complete: exploring, reading, viewing content, where all the activities are tied back to that key outcome, counting atoms and elements. And the teacher was then able to jump into small groups for the teacher-led station. In this example, you can see there's a timer utilized from YouTube so students can stay on task. And the 1, 2, and 3, 4 is the group, and they're showing how they're going to work through the stations. Group 1 is first going to meet with the teacher, then going to move to independent practice, then going to their 5C station, and then doing some digital content, and they rotate through like that. If you're a teacher who does something like the Daily 5 or reading or math workshop, this is the type of structure that you have in place. This example takes you through how it could look in concurrent settings with students who are in school and also at home. This picture goes to a full slide deck that you can walk through and learn about how could it look synchronously, how could it look asynchronously, because that's something we're going to talk about in terms of planning, matching the activity to the environment in which it is best suited. Some things are best done synchronously, some work really well asynchronously. So those are important decisions to make when you're planning. This is a big read that I highly recommend from Dr. Tucker, Combating the Challenges of the Concurrent Classroom with Station Rotation Model. You should really consider what the focus of your role is during the rotations. Are you going to be doing differentiated instruction? Are you going to be doing interactive modeling or guided practice, or conferencing and giving feedback to students? And depending on that role, That is how you will design your stations. So that is an integral decision. How is the teacher going to function during this time to make sure that the rotations are set up accordingly? So let's talk about tools and strategies for success. Of course, all of this should be tied back to the clear learning outcomes for students. Allow those priority standards to guide your lesson design and utilize your LMS for all students. Post the instructions, the materials, anything that students need so they can seamlessly find what they need during rotations. If there's already an instructional model that you've been working with and that works for you, like the 5 E's or explore, explain, apply, use those consistently during the breakout station activities so that those key elements are familiar. And this is really a time to get organized. So if you've ever thought about utilizing a tool like a HyperDoc or utilizing choice boards, they work wonderfully in station rotation. And again, don't be afraid to assign offline work. Not every task has to be digital. And you could even earmark a station called offline during your rotations. Which activities are best suited for desired face-to-face time? You want to maximize that time that you have in person with students or in synchronous meetings, or time that students can be together as peers and really fostering those collaboration skills. And then which activities work well during asynchronous time when students have to be more independent. Those are the types of things you'll think about when you're planning out your station rotations. This is an example template that a teacher has created that helps organize the work for students. So everything they need is here. The links to the stations, the activities, everything is held within this Google slide deck that you can fully customize. So you can click on that and you can customize it for your own needs. There are also many lesson planning templates available for station rotation. This one from Dr. Tucker, again, just kind of outlining the objective and the directions for each space. Now, she teaches upper grade students. Your schedule, if you teach littles, might be more visual and less written directions. Might include audio of you recording the instructions just so everybody's really clear. When they're in collaborative groups or when they are in stations that are more independent, what do we want students to be doing during that time? We still want it to be really meaningful. So there are a lot of different ideas shared on this slide. Some of our favorites from Project Zero in terms of thinking routines and discussion protocols that we want students to be able to think through and be active in their online learning, not just passively sitting and watching YouTube videos. We want there to be actual activities and learning involved. This is another example of strategies for facilitating small group instruction that you can think about if any of those would work for you. When it comes to integration of technology tools, these are some of our favorites for supporting the work that goes on during station rotation. Of course, Jamboard, whiteboard tools like whiteboard.chat or whiteboard.fi. Collaborative slides can go so far, whether you're using Google Slides or shared keynotes or PowerPoints, using things like Pear Deck and Nearpod, and taking advantage of the features in your web conferencing tools, your breakout rooms, your chat features, your screen sharing, and your polls. Take advantage of those things that are already built in. Advice, don't use too many tools that are different throughout the course of a rotation. Stick to one or two that really work really well before adding new things. So let's say we're ready to get started. What should we do? What's step one? Well, just start small. Choose one content area, or if you teach high school, just choose one class to start with and see how it goes. Find what the challenges are and then work to overcome those. Think holistically, okay? What should students know and be able to do by the end of this period of time when we'll be running station rotations? Some teachers like to do them for one day. Some teachers like to span them across 3 or 4 days or a week. So by the end of that period of time, what should students have accomplished? How am I going to group my students? This should change often. Do not permanently group your students according to academic levels. This should change according to the task and according to student needs. And then according to my class size and how I want to group my students, how many stations will I need to keep my groups at a reasonable size, utilize the technology we have, and give them enough time to meet the objectives. Again, identify your role during station rotations. Are you going to be conducting small group direct instruction during that time? Are you going to be pulling kids one-on-one and conferencing? Are you going to be rotating through groups freely and advising them in their work? Or is there some other role that you're going to take? Figure out names for your rotations, create instructions for each rotation for the tasks, and organize everything really cleanly so that kids have everything they need at each rotation. The communication piece is huge. If you have not done station rotations before, you are going to need to communicate clearly how it will work before you start. Do not throw them into groups, into rotations before going through the instructions at every rotation. Try a matrix or a visual schedule like the ones that you've seen in this deck, and always develop routines for assessing and documenting learning. How are students going to submit the work that they've done in the rotation, and in what manner will you provide feedback? So it could look something like this. You're going to set up 4 stations, and the first one, small group collaborative, and kids are going to be in their breakout rooms, and they're going to work as a team to complete this project or assignment in a shared deck or a shared doc. Station 2, teacher direct instruction. You're going to learn about this topic with your teacher. Station 3, independent content exploration. They might be previewing or reviewing vocabulary, key content through videos, through readings, through games. And Station 4, you might incorporate a hyperdoc or a choice board, and they get to choose activities to complete to apply their learning. So now, if you have large blocks of time with your students, they can work through all 4 of these rotations in the course of a day. If your schedules are more segmented, they might be able to complete 2 rotations in a day, and they might head to the next 2 stations the next day. Just keep things flexible to meet your needs. And you also have to consider where students are starting. Some students might need to start with teacher direct instruction and then move on to the more independent work. Other students might be more successful starting with the collaborative time, starting with the independent content exploration and moving from there. But remember, kids can dive into inquiry learning of new content before hearing it from their teacher. Don't forget, it is worthwhile having them dive into content, developing understandings about it, applying their prior knowledge before receiving direct instruction. That is okay. So the end of the slides, additional resources, tons of examples that teachers have shared, tips and strategies and tricks for you to pull from. We'd love to know how it's going, so make sure that you connect with us on social media at OPDC on Twitter and join our new Facebook group for discussions. Good luck implementing your station rotation model. You can do it. Reach out to us with any questions.